Alright, let's set the stage because this one is loaded. Brian Schottenheimer just gave us one of the most revealing and, at the same time, frustrating interviews of his tenure, and Cowboys fans are split right down the middle. Some heard accountability, leadership, and clarity. Others heard excuses, deflections, and just enough coach speak to light a fire under the entire fan base. So let's unpack this, because there's a lot to get through. First off, Schottenheimer came out swinging, standing tall and defending his defensive coordinator like he was ready to take on the entire world. You could feel it from the jump. He wasn't going to throw his guys under the bus. Respect to that, honestly. That's leadership. That's taking bullets for your team. But here's the flip side. When the product on the field has looked as lost and disjointed as this Cowboys defense has over the last few weeks, blind loyalty starts feeling a lot more like willful ignorance. You can't gaslight your fan base when we've all got eyes. We've seen the film. We've watched the blown assignments, the missed tackles, the lack of containment, and the complete failure to dominate the trenches. One of the first things Schottenheimer admitted to the media was that the team flat out got owned at the line of scrimmage. That's not something you hear often from this staff. He said it himself, the Cowboys weren't physical enough. They didn't play to their identity. And when a team like Carolina pushes you around up front, that's not just a bad day. That's a red flag. And sure, he tried to downplay it by saying it was just one game. But let's be real, that's not the first time this season we've seen this defense collapse under pressure. Then came the conversation about fundamentals. Schotty leaned heavy into that. Fundamentals this, fundamentals that. Talked about hand placement, gap integrity, run fits, the whole deal. And yeah, those things matter. But at this point in the season, you shouldn't still be talking about reteaching the basics. This isn't week 2. It's mid-season. If guys still don't know how to hold their gap or contain the edge, either they're not being coached properly or they're not the right players for the scheme. Period. And that's where Schottenheimer starts losing people. Because as much as he preached fundamentals and coaching accountability, there was a whole lot of defending going on. He tried to explain away some of the breakdowns by talking about communication issues and players pressing too hard. He said guys are trying to do too much, playing hero ball, though he didn't quite use the phrase until it got brought up by a reporter. But again, if players are pressing, trying to make plays outside the scheme, that tells you they don't trust the scheme. That's not a player problem. That's a system problem. He also touched on run fits being off and linebackers processing slowly. And if you've watched the games, you know that's spot on. The linebackers have looked a step behind all year. Misreads, late reactions, out of position, it's been brutal. He tried to simplify it by saying the eye discipline isn't where it needs to be and that they're going to adjust how they coach those reads. Okay, fine. But why wasn't that fixed weeks ago? And why are we still hearing about confusion this deep into the season? Now, let's talk about this idea that help is on the way. Schottenheimer brought up the possibility of certain guys coming back from injury and how that could impact their rotations. But here's the thing. Personnel isn't the issue. Not entirely. This defense has talent. There are playmakers on all 3 levels. But when the scheme doesn't put them in a position to succeed, or worse, when the scheme asks them to do things they aren't built to do, then it doesn't matter who you plug in. They're going to struggle. And then we got to the most telling moment of the entire presser, the trade conversation. When asked about potential changes, Schottenheimer danced around it, but the writing's on the wall. The Cowboys might have no choice but to make a move. Because if this defense keeps bleeding yards and looking lost, the pressure from the front office and the fan base is going to boil over. They can't keep pretending that tweaking practice schedules and watching tape a little differently is going to fix all of this. Schotty tried to tell us there's a board full of ideas, and they're breaking down tape in new ways. Watching all first and second down runs grouped together, all first and second down passes together. That sounds great. Innovative even. But it also sounds desperate. Like a coaching staff scrambling to find something, anything, that will stop the bleeding. Because right now, the bleeding is bad. What made this interview even harder to digest was the constant, almost robotic insistence that this team is close. 10 to 15% away. That's all it is, according to Schottenheimer. Not a full overhaul, just a little tightening up here and there. But when your defense is consistently giving up chunk plays and can't stop the run to save their lives, you need more than a 15% improvement. You need a full reset. And if they're not willing to admit that, they're going to keep chasing their tails. And let's talk about accountability. Because as much as Shoddy tried to take it on his own shoulders, talking about adjusting practice schedules, spending more time in defensive meetings, helping his coaches find solutions, it all felt a little hollow. He kept saying, "We need to be better as coaches." But at the same time, he never once publicly challenged his defensive coordinator. Not even a hint of it. Instead, he praised him, called him a great coach, said he believes in him. And again, that's fine if the results back it up. But right now, the results are ugly. And it's not like this is a one-game collapse. It's been building. Week after week of inconsistent play, poor tackling, lack of identity on defense. They go zone one week, man-to-man the next, blitz heavy one game, conservative the next. There's no cohesion, no consistency. And when Schottenheimer was pressed about it, he kept circling back to fundamentals. But Cowboys fans don't want to hear about fundamentals anymore. They want results. What made this even more frustrating is that the offense is quietly doing its job. Dak Prescott has been playing some of the best football of his career over the past few weeks. 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. Efficient, poised, productive. And yet, it's going to waste because the defense can't hold up its end of the bargain. Schottenheimer said he had no doubt the Cowboys would win after getting a late stop and starting a drive near midfield. And then boom, 3 and out. No rhythm. No execution. And sure, Shoddy admitted he didn't love the play-calling sequence. But if your margin for error is that small, if you have to be perfect just to squeak out a win, then the foundation is broken. Schottenheimer's repeated insistence that this is a team game started to sound like deflection. It started to feel like he was more interested in protecting his coaches than fixing the problems. He said multiple times that the players in the room are good enough to win. He doesn't think the answer is trading for new personnel or making major schematic changes. But at the same time, he admitted the communication isn't there, the fundamentals are off, the linebackers are processing slow, and the team isn't playing physical enough. So which is it? Are the players good enough, or are they not? Executing? Because you can't have it both ways. Even when asked about specific plays, like that critical 4th down where Dono thought he was tighter than he was, Shoddy chalked it up to miscommunication. Said the game didn't come down to that one play. And sure, maybe it didn't. But you stack enough of those miscommunications, and suddenly they define your season. The biggest issue here is that everything Shoddy said, every scheme adjustment, every coaching point, every "we just need to clean this up," hinges on one thing: belief. He believes the coaches can fix it. He believes the players can execute. He believes the defense is close. But belief without results is just blind faith. And if the Cowboys don't start showing something different on the field, and fast, then all this belief turns into empty promises. And here's where the conversation really takes a turn, because after all the film talk, schematic tweaking, and emphasis on fundamentals, what becomes clear is that Brian Schottenheimer is staking his reputation on loyalty and internal development. He's betting that the answers aren't out there. They're already inside the building. And while that might sound noble, in the NFL, noble doesn't always get results. Sometimes loyalty becomes liability. Sometimes trusting the process is the very thing that keeps you from admitting it's broken. When he was asked directly if the team had enough in-house to fix their defensive issues, Shoddy didn't hesitate. He said yes. And that moment felt like a defining fork in the road. Because if the defense continues to unravel, if it keeps bleeding yards, if the miscommunications persist, and the Cowboys keep falling short against teams they should be dominating, then we're all going to look back at that statement and ask why the alarm wasn't sounded earlier. Why didn't they act when the signs were right there? There was also a moment where Schottenheimer seemed to bristle at a question about Micah Parsons and whether the defense would look different if he were still on the field. It was an odd exchange. He clearly didn't want to engage with the idea that one player's absence could be used as a scapegoat, or worse, a lifeline. He downplayed the question entirely, reminding everyone that it takes 11 on defense, not 1. And sure, that's technically true, but when your most dynamic player is missing and the defense collapses without him, it's only fair to ask whether the scheme was too reliant on one superstar bailing it out every week. What really stood out during this stretch of the interview was Schottenheimer's reluctance to call anyone out directly. Not a single player was named in criticism, not a single coach. He talked about roles, fits, alignment, technique, but always in the abstract. And that's what left a lot of fans frustrated. Because we've watched these games. We've seen Donovan Wilson get beat in coverage over and over again. We've seen missed tackles, blown assignments, defensive backs trailing receivers by 3 yards on every route. We don't need names sugar-coated. We need accountability. Even when he was asked about communication breakdowns, something multiple players have admitted has been an issue, he went out of his way to soften the blow. He said it's not about confidence in the calls, but rather the speed at which they're being communicated. That maybe guys are whispering instead of shouting because they're unsure. And that's an honest, even vulnerable insight. But it also paints a picture of a defense playing hesitant, unsure, not owning their roles. That's dangerous, because hesitation in this league gets you beat every time. At one point, Shoddy even brought up the telephone game analogy, comparing how messages can get lost from the front to the back of the defense. That's not something you want to hear about a unit that's already halfway through the season. Communication issues like that should be cleaned up in training camp. If they're still haunting you in October, it's not a fluke. It's a systemic failure. And that leads right into the growing concern that the Cowboys' defense simply lacks an identity. When asked what kind of defense they are, Schottenheimer talked about being able to play man-to-man, fire zones, and match coverages. He said they're multiple. But multiple doesn't mean versatile if you're not executing any of it well. Multiple, without mastery, just becomes confusion. A jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none approach that leaves your players thinking instead of reacting. And in this league, that split second costs you games. What's becoming clear is that this coaching staff is reacting to symptoms, not curing the disease. Every week, they shift something. Tweak a practice schedule, rewatch film differently, move a player around, simplify a read, but none of it feels like it's solving the underlying problem. There's no cohesion, no rhythm, just patches, tape over cracks. And the longer that goes on, the deeper the fractures become. Schottenheimer did mention some younger players like Shamar James and Maris who are showing promise. And that's encouraging. Those are the bright spots in an otherwise messy defensive picture. Shamar, in particular, seems like a guy with instincts and physicality, someone who can develop into a cornerstone. But he's still learning. He's still adjusting to the NFL game. And putting the burden of fixing this defense on a rookie's shoulders is not the answer. Before we roll on, subscribe to Cowboys Wire News, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Your support keeps the Dallas Cowboys updates coming. Tell us what you think in the comments. In what could be one of the most shocking developments of the NFL offseason, rumors swirling around the league suggest that the Dallas Cowboys have reached an agreement with superstar defensive lineman Aaron Donald. While no official confirmation has yet come from the team or the players' camp, multiple insiders are whispering that the deal is as good as done, signaling a massive shakeup for a Cowboys defense already loaded with talent. Donald, widely considered one of the most dominant defenders of his generation, had announced his retirement after last season, or so everyone thought. Now, if the rumors are true, the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year could be dusting off his cleats for one more run, this time wearing the iconic blue and silver of America's team. Sources close to the situation claim that Jerry Jones personally pushed for the move, viewing Donald as the missing piece to reignite the Cowboys' once-feared pass rush. The timing couldn't be more intriguing. Dallas has struggled to generate consistent pressure since losing key defensive contributors, and with questions lingering around the offense, a defensive resurgence might be exactly what the franchise needs. Pairing Donald with Micah Parsons would instantly create one of the most terrifying front sevens in the league, a nightmare scenario for opposing quarterbacks. Whispers inside the Cowboys' locker room reportedly describe a buzz unlike anything seen in recent years. Players are said to be electrified by the possibility of lining up next to a future Hall of Famer. Meanwhile, Rams fans are still in disbelief, wondering if their longtime cornerstone could truly trade Los Angeles Sunshine for Texas Heat. If the rumor holds true, this move could redefine the balance of power in the NFC. The Cowboys, often accused of being all hype and no substance, might finally be assembling a defense capable of backing up the headlines. Whether it's a last dance for Donald or the start of a new chapter, one thing's for certain. The NFL world is watching Dallas and holding its breath. That's a wrap from Cowboys Wire News. For breaking Cowboys updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Tell us your take in the comments.